Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at the main stage. I hope everyone got your coffee or tea. Now, for our opening keynote, we're very excited. For day 3, we're off to a strong start. We have globally respected entrepreneur, investor, and co-author of Blitzscaling. He's going to bring his deep experience in building and advising hyper-growth companies. Now, today, he'll explore how Blitzscaling applies in this new era of innovation, where AI, frontier tech, and global challenges are sort of reshaping industries faster than ever. He'll also share lessons from Silicon Valley's most iconic founders and how these strategies can help you and your bold ideas scale globally and sustainably. Please join me, big round of applause to welcome Mr. Chris Ye.
Thank you. Good morning.
The stage is yours.
Excellent. Good morning, Singapore. How are you doing here? Oh my goodness. It is such a pleasure to be here. This is actually the second time I've been in Singapore this year, and I've got to say, it is one of my favorite places in the world. So what I'm going to do today is explain a little bit about blitzscaling and explain, especially since the book came out in 2018, how AI is changing how it works. So let's begin with blitzscaling. Where does blitzscaling come from? Well, it comes from the class that I taught at Stanford University, my alma mater, with my friend Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn. With this class, we set out to explain the question, what is the secret of Silicon Valley? If you think about it, Silicon Valley is home to 4 of the world's most valuable companies. It is a place where so much innovation is coming about. And the question is, why? It's not like there's people who are smarter than the people here in Singapore. So what is the thing that caused it? And that's what we set out to do. So to figure this out, we started off by looking at Reid's career. Now, the interesting thing about Reid is you know him primarily as the co-founder of LinkedIn. But I would argue that LinkedIn is one of his less successful companies, because he was a founding board member and executive at PayPal, the first investor in Facebook, the founder of LinkedIn, the Series A lead investor in Airbnb, and the first commercial investor in OpenAI. So over and over again, what Reid has been able to do is to find the companies that are going to be the big winners of tomorrow. And so with the book Blitzscaling, we tried to encapsulate Reid's own investment and entrepreneurship philosophy into one small package. We define blitzscaling as the pursuit of rapid growth by prioritizing speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty. Now, the first part is not too controversial. How many people in the audience are entrepreneurs? How many people are starting a company? How many of you want rapid growth for your startup? How many of you want your startup to stagnate until it dies? Nobody ever says that second thing. Everyone wants rapid growth. But the second part of this definition, prioritizing speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty, is a bit more controversial because it sounds risky. And in fact, it is. And so the key question is, what are the circumstances under which it is more risky not to take the risk? Now, we often explain this in American popular culture as the philosophy of the race car driver Ricky Bobby from the movie Talladega Nights. In this movie, this dim-witted race car driver has a slogan he inherited from his father, which is, if you ain't first, you're last. This is the key to blitzscaling. When you are in a winner-take-most market, or a Ricky Bobby market, if you will, if you ain't first, you're last. Think about the most valuable companies in the world. All of them got there by winning a Ricky Bobby market, whether it's NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. You know the names and you know the markets. But it's not enough just to say, I'm going to grow quickly. You have to have the right circumstances. And that's why you need these different elements of blitzscaling. Now, the necessary elements down at the bottom, those are necessary because without them, you're not blitzscaling a good business. Product market fit keeps your business sustainable. A big market and high gross margins allows you to make money, which is the purpose of starting a company. And you need to be able to scale up the operations in the organization. But these describe every good business. The 2 key factors that set blitzscalable businesses apart are that winner-take-most market, where if you become the winner, you get to keep that market for decades. Usually this is because of network effects. So as the number of users grows, the value of the network to each individual user also grows. This means that value growth goes exponential as the user base increases, but also it means that no competitor can catch up. Imagine if somebody created a clone of Facebook today, but it had no users. Who wants to sign up for that? Nobody, because the value comes from the network. The other thing you need is the ability to have superior distribution to your competitors. If the goal is to grow fast and win the market, your ability to win that market depends on your distribution. It better be something better than, I'm just going to spend more money. That's a misperception that people often have about blitzscaling. Assuming that you are able to blitzscale, one of the things is your company is going to change tremendously as it grows. Your company might be doubling, not every decade, but every year or even every quarter. And so as you go through the growth of your company, you're going to encounter numerous predictable key transitions. Now, I don't have time to go through all of these today, but I'm going to ask for a volunteer from the audience to tell me which one they would like to hear about. So just pick any of these transitions above, raise your hand, and I'll call on the first person who's willing to be brave enough to point one out. Again, you don't have to answer anything, you just have to pick one. So go ahead, who would like to pick? Yes, back there. So he wants to know about small teams to large teams. So this is a very important point. This is all based on human nature. If you have a small family of 2 or 3 people, that acts very differently than if you live in a dormitory of 50 people. I think all of us have experienced that. So one of the things that happens as you grow is you have to transition from managing a small team where everything is informal to a large team where you have perhaps somebody who's in charge of the team, perhaps a set of managers, and the only way to grow your company large enough is to manage this transition. Now, the other thing about blitzscaling is very counterintuitive. I've just talked to you guys about the fact that blitzscaling means going against your normal instincts. Well, guess what? You have to do that in terms of how you manage the company as well. So same deal as before. I have these counterintuitive rules of blitzscaling. All of them are explained at length in the book Blitzscaling, available in stores everywhere. But what I'd love for you to do is to have one person pick one of these counterintuitive rules they'd like to have explained. So who would like to choose? And let's have it be a different person this time. Who wants to raise their hand? Yes, right in front. Launch a product that embarrasses you? That's a good one. They're all good ones, of course. So launch a product that embarrasses you. This is actually a famous Reid Hoffman original saying. So the exact quote is, if you're not embarrassed by your first product when you launch it, you've launched too late. So this is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because we all know there's only one chance to make a first impression. We really want to perfect our product. Why on earth would you launch a product that embarrasses you? In fact, this actually comes up in the HBO television series, Silicon Valley. They literally talk about this rule. So the key thing is this. It doesn't matter how smart you are. You know less about what your product should be than the market does. If you spend your time carefully refining in the absence of true market feedback, you're going to end up going down the wrong direction, and it'll take longer to get your product good enough than if you just launched anyways. This is actually something that Reid experienced in his own life. When he first created a social network, it wasn't LinkedIn. It was something called SocialNet. And he and his team spent all this time polishing SocialNet, polishing, that by the time they launched it, they didn't have enough money left to actually make the company successful. So he swore this wouldn't happen with LinkedIn. And when he went to launch LinkedIn, right before he launched, some of the members of the product team came to him and said, "We can't launch." He said, "What do you mean?" They said, "We can't launch because we need to build a tool that will allow people to find consultants on LinkedIn. Because after all, isn't that a perfect use case for LinkedIn, finding a consultant?" And Reid said, "Tell you guys what, we're to launch the product anyways. And if everyone wants that consultant engine, we're going to build it." And so he launched LinkedIn, and people began clamoring for a feature. But it wasn't the consultant finder. It was profile pictures. It's hard to imagine now. LinkedIn launched without a profile picture. It seems like an oversight. Like, what kind of dummy does that? Well, Reid Hoffman is a genius, and he did that. In fact, Steve Jobs, when he launched the iPhone, said there's no need for an app store. People will have all the apps they ever want just from Apple. How many people here have not installed a third-party app on their iPhone? Yeah, exactly. If Steve Jobs can get it wrong, you can get it wrong too. Launch your product early, get feedback from the market, and whether it's adding profile pictures to LinkedIn or adding an app store to the iPhone, it's going to make your product a lot better, a lot quicker. Now, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Everyone talks about how big it is, but they don't necessarily explain why it's so big. This is a chart of per capita global GDP. So this basically shows you the history of human civilization. And you can see it's basically flat. Goes up a little bit, down a little bit. Sometimes there's a Roman Empire, sometimes there is a Black Death, but it's basically the same until we get to the 18th century and the Industrial Revolution. And all of a sudden it goes exponential. Now that's why people are always comparing AI to the Industrial Revolution, because the Industrial Revolution really was a game changer. But the question is, why? So the Industrial Revolution, for the first time, allowed us to amplify or replace muscle power with mechanical power. If you think about it, before the Industrial Revolution, if you wanted to do something, you had to do it with your hands, or you had to do it with a horse or an ox or something else like that. Maybe once in a while you had a windmill or a water mill to grind some grain. And that is why, even though we have all these civilizations, all this knowledge, global GDP remained the same. Then, when we had the steam engine and then electricity, we had the ability to burn fossil fuels and use that energy to make things in our lives. And in fact, everything around us in this room is a product of the Industrial Revolution. The same thing is starting to happen with AI, except instead of replacing or amplifying muscle power, for the first time we're replacing or amplifying brain power. Now we've always had some ability to do this. If you think about it, an abacus is something that amplifies brain power. A calculator amplifies it even further. A spreadsheet does even more, but it's always been with highly structured information. This generative AI revolution is the first time we've been able to do it with the unstructured data that is actually most of the data in existence. That's why it's so powerful. During the Industrial Revolution in the UK, the textile industry increased labor factor productivity by 40 times. So you could make 40 times as much with the same workplace. That is what drove that massive value creation. But on the AI side, it could be even greater. So for example, there is software to help lawyers review NDAs. How many people here have ever had to pay a lawyer to review an NDA? Not fun, right? How would you like it if you had to pay them for 30 seconds of work instead of several hours? This software is now allowing lawyers to review NDA 300 times faster. Now that's an extreme example, but it's just the beginning. Last year, I wrote a book on how to become a venture capitalist. I wrote that book in 12 hours, thanks to the power of AI. And in fact, at the end of this presentation, I'll be giving you a QR code that will let you download that book and download the slides from this presentation. Now, the thing about AI and Blitzscaling is they interact in a very interesting way. AI is creating more and more of these winner-take-most opportunities. We've already seen how there are new leaders like OpenAI that become unimaginably valuable in an incredibly short period of time. But that's just the first wave. There's going to be multiple waves within this AI revolution, and there's plenty of opportunities for you as an entrepreneur to jump on those waves. But the question becomes, how do you figure out the best way to build that value? Now, there is an obvious way to build value, which is to make things faster, cheaper, and better. And there's no question, that is hugely valuable. I like everything faster, cheaper, and better. And in fact, that's the power of AI. Most of the time you had to choose between them, now you can have all three. But the fact is, this is pretty obvious. If you can think of this, so can your competitors. Everyone's going to be using AI to do these things. Everyone's going to be generating massively increased productivity. In fact, the way you create the most value is by creating something new. How many people have an iPhone or Android phone in their pocket right now? I think everyone. Does anyone still have a flip phone? Anyone? Anyone? All right. I want you to consider the iPhone. Is the iPhone faster at making phone calls than an old flip phone? Like for example, for those of you who are old enough, you may remember this particular song. Na 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 na. Familiar at all? All right. Is the iPhone faster at making phone calls than your old Nokia phone? No. Is it better? In other words, does it stay on the line more? Does it avoid drops more? Or does it just go out every time you're in an elevator? It goes out every time you're in an elevator. And is the iPhone cheaper than those phones that you got for free whenever you went anywhere? No. So the iPhone, the most valuable product in the world, is not faster, better, or cheaper than what it replaced. It is something new. It was taking new technologies and using it to do something that was never possible before, that was in fact worth more. So as entrepreneurs, I want you to think beyond just making something faster, better, and cheaper, beyond just enhancing an existing product, and think about how you can create a brand new product category. Now you have to think about what industry you're going to be in. I'm imagining that most people in the audience are looking at AI and saying, all right, what's AI going to do to my industry? Is it going to amplify my industry, bring it to new heights, or is it going to destroy it and decimate it? Well, the answer to that depends on the answer to two questions. The first is, how much can AI amplify or replace human brain power for your particular industry? The higher the amount, the greater the impact. It could be a positive impact, it could be a negative impact, but the higher the amount, the greater the impact. The second question is even more essential. How elastic is the demand curve? So I want you to picture your economics class from high school. In it, you know there's a supply curve and a demand curve. And where those two meet, that's the price and the quantity of goods or services sold. What AI tends to do is to lower the supply curve. And so what happens next depends on the demand curve. If the demand curve is inelastic, if in other words, people are going to buy roughly the same amount regardless of the price, then the industry is going to get crushed. So for example, I talked about lawyers earlier. What do you think happens to a lawyer who tries to charge full price for an NDA review when somebody else is willing to do it for $5? There will be a race to the bottom, and again, I apologize to all the lawyers in the audience. There will be fewer lawyers. The ones who remain who adopt AI may still do very well, but there will be a lot fewer than there were before. In contrast, if the demand curve is elastic, it means as the price declines, people will buy more and more. Think back to the textile industry. Before the Industrial Revolution, only rich people had more than one or two sets of clothing. We just wore the same stuff day after day until it fell apart. But once those textiles became cheaper, once they became 40 times cheaper, people began buying more. How many people here have now bought clothes, brand new, that they've never worn, and then turned around and sold them or gave them away? Pretty much everyone, right? That's the power of abundance. That is an industry that is going to grow when AI comes in. So let's talk now about how you can change your mindset to thrive, right? Hopefully I've convinced you that AI is going to change things. What are the different ways you can think about this? Now, I'm not going to talk about individual models or training regimens because that's all obsolete in a week anyways. It's probably obsolete tomorrow. But I'm talking to you about some mindset shifts that will help you thrive over the next decade plus. The first is to understand that mediocrity is now free. One of my friends, the chief marketing officer of MetLife, the big American insurance company, gave me this, and so I always credit him. His name is Michael Roberts. He told his marketing team, with ChatGPT, mediocrity is free. See, if you bring me mediocre stuff, it better have cost me nothing. And this has huge implications. In cases where mediocrity is good enough, it's going to crush the industry. But for those of us who want to remain and still have jobs, it means we got to go beyond. Quality has to be what we do, not just turning the crank. And that means, forget about just building a 10x product, right? That's going to be common in the age of AI. You have to build something that's much more productive. It's not enough to be better than the status quo. You have to be better than the competition. And that means being much, much better. AI is incredible at execution. And so what we need to supply is that intent. Our intent will drive AI execution, much like the intent of a manager can make an entire team more productive. But even more important than just being a manager, just being someone who assigns work, is having that leadership ability, the ability to have aspiration, to think bigger, and to take advantage of these new tools in ways that other people hadn't thought before. And so the people of the future who are going to really do well and really drive massive productivity gains are people who are going to be able to think bigger than ever. And that is why hiring great people is more important than ever. There's this trend going around, a lie that we've been told, that AI is the great leveler. Yes, we all have the same AI in our pockets. But people who are experts, people who are highly skilled, can get so much more value out of AI than those who are not. In fact, not only are great people more productive than the average person, great people can be amplified more by AI than the average person. So in fact, the gulf of productivity between the great and the not so great is going to be even bigger than before. So as you're thinking of building out your teams, hold that bar high for quality. Make sure you're hiring people who are remarkable, who will become even more remarkable when leveraging the power of AI. And if you're still an individual contributor, figure out how you can be one of those great people who can drive that massive productivity increase. And this is still available because AI doesn't have a technology problem, it has an adoption problem. So AI is this amazing stuff, it's free, it's instantaneous, and yet most of us do not use it nearly enough, right? It's in our pockets, but there's probably 100 times a day when you could use AI, but you're not. About a month ago, one of the founders that I've invested in at Blitzscaling Ventures, an AI founder from Korea, maybe he knows some of the folks who are in the K startup area. He has a company that allows you to go from text to CAD. So from a text prompt to a fully 3D design with dimensions, ready to go into 3D printing or some other form of manufacturing process. He's got great customers with Hyundai and Samsung. That's all fantastic. He's a 24-year-old graduate of KAIST, which is like the MIT or NUS of Korea. And he comes to me, we're meeting on the Stanford campus, and he comes to me and he says, I would like to expand into the United States. Can you help me think of advisory board members I should seek out who can help me grow? I said, well, you know, I think Carl Bass, the former CEO of Autodesk, he does some investments. He'd be great to get on board. I know him from this conference. My old advisor, David Kelly from IDEO. Obviously, they know everyone in the industry. He would also be a great person to talk with. But why are you asking me this question? You just spent 10 minutes showing me the very fancy AI browser that you use instead of Safari or Chrome. And yet you, a 24-year-old AI founder, did not think to use AI for this key task. If 24-year-old founders are not using AI nearly enough, what about the rest of us? If AI did not advance any further from today, we would still have years or even decades left of productivity increases just from figuring out better how to use it. The implication here is that as individuals, when you build your products, don't just think about building better technology. Think about how you're going to get people to adopt it. And this is especially true in the enterprise, where oftentimes CEOs and board members are saying, let's bring AI in, not asking the people who are doing the actual work. Applying the Armageddon principle. Now this is a little confusing one. It has to do with American popular culture. In 1998, there was a movie called Armageddon about an asteroid that's going to hit the Earth. And in order to save the planet, they have to send Bruce Willis up into space to drill down to the center of the asteroid and blow it up. Now, Bruce Willis in this movie is an oil drilling guy, and NASA comes to him and says, you need to train our astronauts how to become oil drillers. And he tells them, nah, never work. You got to train my oil drillers to become astronauts. Now, Ben Affleck, who is also one of the stars of this movie, realized how crazy this sounded. He went to the director on the commentary track and he said, so let me get this straight. These oil drillers are illiterate criminals, and these astronauts are Rhodes Scholars with 5 advanced degrees. How come we can't train astronauts to be oil drillers? It makes no sense. And Michael Bay, the director, said, shut up, Affleck. And that was the end of the discussion. However, the irony is, Michael Bay is actually right. The Armageddon principle is that we need to train oil drillers to become astronauts. There are a bunch of astronauts over in a big tower in San Francisco working for OpenAI, in another tower working for Anthropic. Those people are astronauts. They are brilliant. But they're not oil drillers. They don't know how to drill through rock. They don't understand the business context of the various problems they're trying to solve. And so a big opportunity is in being able to leverage the business context to actually make AI productive in the real world. Now, everyone's talking about vibe coding. Everyone will build their own software in the future. It's become to the point where, at one point, my co-author Reid Hoffman, as an experiment, just said to ChatGPT, hey, build me LinkedIn. And it actually built something for him. It wasn't as good as the full thing, obviously. The full thing is a multi-$100 billion business for Microsoft, but it did pretty well. And yet, good software still requires expertise. If you build something like vibe coding, it's not going to last. There was a guy who built an app called T in America. It was a place where women could decide and share information on which dudes were bad dudes to date. And he vibe coded it. He had no technical background. And then about a month after it launched and rose to the top of the App Store, people discovered, in fact, all the information it had was unencrypted and available to anyone. Good software still requires expertise. When Jensen Huang says that all AI code is going to be written by AI in the future, he's probably right, but there's going to be software engineers directing it. And in fact, software, the demand curve is highly elastic. We will all have 100 or 1,000 times as much software in the future, and I predict in 10 years we will have more software developers than we have today. The future is about prototyping, not planning. I had the good fortune of studying product design when I was an undergrad at Stanford University. Maybe you've heard of the D School. One of the key principles behind the D School and design thinking is to prototype. Now, you guys are all probably in this room because you're very good at planning. You're very good at carefully reasoning out a set of options and picking one and then executing on it. But thanks to AI, which is so fast and so cheap, we all need to start thinking like designers. We need to start prototyping our products, getting feedback, iterating on them, and planning less. In the time it took you to debate what to do, you could have done all 3 options and just picked the best one. Now, the final one is really important. All over the world, I see audiences and they ask me, what should I do about my kids? They're growing up in this world of AI. They're using ChatGPT to do their homework. What am I going to do? And the key here is don't seek answers, seek understanding. So here's the funny thing, right? ChatGPT has become very popular with students because our education system judges students on their ability to give answers. And ChatGPT does precisely that. But that's not the point. We're testing whether people can give answers because that's our best way to test their understanding. The real thing we're trying to develop is understanding. So as you go back to your family, whether it's your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, or what have you, or even for yourself, when you use AI, don't just use it to get the answer and move on. Stop and get understanding as well. Ask it why that answer is correct. And by the way, we're so used to asking questions of AI, ask AI to ask questions of you. Have AI ask you questions that will drive your understanding, that help you deeply understand what you're actually trying to do. Now, this is an incredible world that we live in today. Right? AI is changing the world, and understanding the tools of blitzscaling will allow you to be one of the ones who helps shape that world. And in the interest of giving you access to those tools, I'm going to put this QR code up. This will allow you to download the slides that I just showed you. It'll also allow you to download that book that I mentioned that I'd written with AI. It'll also allow you to download yet another book I wrote, which is How to Write a Book in a Day with AI. So lots of other goodies as well. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming out here to Switch and to staying with me for this particular talk. As you can tell, I think that there is a tremendous world of opportunity out there, and I hope that these tools will help you do that. I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of the show, and thank you guys so very much for having me here. It's been a huge pleasure.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Lots of thoughts, lots of things to think about.
Absolutely.
I love that last one. Don't
Thank you.
seek answers, because that's prescriptive, right? Seek understanding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very
Chris,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Now, if you felt that was thought-provoking, come back and be part of the conversation with our next panel discussion. Our speaker's going to explore how technology, data, and generative AI are driving new growth engines. Our panel discussion next is all about next-gen digital businesses, and that's happening about 10:40 a.m., not p.m., I had my coffee already, 10:40 a.m. right here at the main stage. We'll see you back in a few moments. Thank you.